Hey everybody, this is Nick Morrell with Audio Video Export. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to introduce, to bring you and have you guys here and host this event. Panamax is one of my absolute favorite brands of all of the brands it is that we carry, and we've got a lot of really good ones. But when it comes to real-time power protection, in my opinion, there are only 4 brands that are out there that are worth any value. 3 of them Audio Video Export sells, and we're focusing on one of them here today, and then the sister company, which we'll talk a little bit about as well, Furman, which is my absolute all-time favorite as well. There's a little bit of a division when it comes to the Panamax versus Furman. There's a little bit of overlap. There's some different technologies that are involved in each of them, so they each have their own place, and it's really awesome that well, it's Nortec now, but before it was separate. But that there are those 2 categories, you know, the residential and the commercial spaces. And Panamax is, again, one of my favorite brands. A special thanks to Matt Garfine, who is here in order to be able to train with us today. Always appreciative when he's able to come out and spend some time with us. For those of you who are on board with us, as a quick note, there's a question box. So I will ask questions and sometimes interrupt Matt, you know, as the question merits. But we do expect to be able to have a little bit of time afterwards in order to be able to do some Q&A. So feel free to go ahead and write those questions in. And if you're watching this online and you know, on our YouTube page, if you have any questions, you know, that you want to ask, please do write to your audio video export salesperson, if you know who that is. And if you don't have one, then please write nick@av-export.com. It's always a pleasure to serve you in any way, shape, or form. Without any further ado, Matt, thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and shut my camera off and let you get cracking. It's just all yours.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank you, Nick. And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Matthew Garfine, and my company, Audio Americas, we're the Latin America and Caribbean sales rep agency for Nortec, as well as some other audio manufacturing groups. We have a long and successful relationship working with Audio Video Export as our authorized export wholesaler in Miami. They do a great job. They're one of the best distributors in the territory. And I really appreciate the effort that Nick has taken to organize this series of trainings. So I'm going to go ahead and shut off my camera as well, because you're not going to learn anything looking at me. And we'll go ahead and get started. I know everyone can see my screen. So yeah, today we're going to talk about Panamax, and Panamax is part of the Nortec Control family of brands and solutions. Actually, I'm going to have to update this slide pretty soon. Nortec was recently purchased by a company called NICE out of Italy, which is really big in the electronic security market. And so soon it's going to be called NICE North America. But for now, it's still Nortec Control. And what's interesting about Nortec is it's one of the few companies that groups brands of several different electronics categories under one roof. So as you can see here from this slide, Nortec is active in automation and signal management with brands like Elan and Geffen. AVE also sells Geffen. Architectural audio, loudspeakers, Speakercraft, Proficient, power protection and administration. We have both Panamax and Furman. And on the electronic security side, we have 2 gig alarms and linear access control. And then there's Numera, which is kind of a separate a brand, which is more, how do you explain Numera? It's for example, older people wear a device around their neck so that when they fall down, the device detects it and sends an automatic note to their doctor that they've fallen, or to a family member. So kind of nothing to do with the rest of Nortec, but that is one of the brands that's under their roof. So we're here to talk about electricity today and electrical problems, which we're all aware of. I think there's not a single place in the Western Hemisphere that doesn't suffer from electrical problems. The main reason for that is that our grid is getting old. Most countries in the Western Hemisphere have power grids that are more than 100 years old, that were designed long before everybody had tons of electronic devices in their homes. And so the electrical grid is constantly failing and suffering surges and brownouts, et cetera, just due to aging infrastructure. And that, of course, is death to many electronic components. And that's hence the market for products like Panamax. Panamax is one way to protect your customer's investment in equipment. So in the case of any kind of a catastrophic electrical event, it sacrifices the Panamax unit instead of the equipment. When we talk about electrical problems, 4 main types of problems. The problem can come through the grid, like I was talking about. The problem could also be generated locally in the house. You might have an appliance in the home that's putting a lot of noise into the power line. Acts of nature, like lightning strikes, and even whatever your neighbors are doing, because at the end of the day, we're all sharing our power grid with the people in our immediate vicinity. So if your neighbors have a bunch of noisy electronics or appliances, that will affect the AC in your home. So some things that can happen, you get spikes and surges, which can kill power supplies, over and under voltages or brownouts, which can gradually hurt power supplies. And of course, catastrophic events like lightning, where suddenly everything that's not protected is blown up. So there are more than one way of getting a surge protection in the system. We always think of surge coming through the AC power lines, but in fact, surges can also come through your satellite TV or cable TV line, come through your Ethernet line, your telephone line. It can come through the connection to your electric gate. It can come through loudspeaker cables. It can come through CCTV cameras. There's a lot of ways that surges can get through to damage your equipment. And unfortunately, what most audio dealers and integrators are selling along with their equipment, if they're selling anything at all for power protection, they're selling these cheap power strips. In fact, a lot of dealers and integrators aren't selling anything at all. They're just missing this category entirely. And people are going to the local hardware store and spending $10 on this, pardon me saying it, it's a piece of crap. And what are these power strips made of? They're basically plastic bodies. They have a bunch of MOVs, which are called metal oxide varistors. And the MOVs are there basically to absorb a certain amount of heat and surge, but the amount of protection that they offer is very limited. And there's definitely no filtration to remove noise from the line. So there's a closer look at the MOVs. And MOVs are rated with this term joules, which you may have heard. So the more MOVs power strip has, the higher the joule rating. So technically, the more heat it can absorb. So is it better than nothing? Yes. But in the event of a catastrophic surge, these things are so crappy, they're going to pass on that surge straight through to the devices that are plugged in. And then you're going to get something like this. These sort of nightmare pictures of burnt up power strips. And even The Simpsons made fun of these kinds of connections, as you can see in that picture. So when we talk about electricity and protecting equipment, we like to talk about the circle of the bubble of protection. Because as I said before, to protect our equipment, we got to protect surges that can come through the ground, through coax, through data line, through telephone line. Not to mention, what about other components in the system that are not connected where the rack is? For example, video projectors tend to be mounted on the ceiling with a dedicated AC plug. You need to have some kind of protection for that unit as well. Same thing with a powered subwoofer. If it's on the other side of the room, it's plugged into a separate wall jack, you need some kind of protection there. And Panamax offers a wide range of solutions, from sophisticated rack mount units with 16 plugs to single plug units for situations like this where you only need to protect one individual component. So before I go any further, I want to use an analogy. And anyone who knows me knows I like to use the analogy of cars, because everybody can relate to cars, right? So when you go out to buy a brand new car, usually what's the first thing you do when you take the car home is you contract an insurance policy, so that if the car gets damaged, you have coverage, right? You got to think about power protection as insurance, and you need to sell it to your customers as insurance. Your customer is spending how much money on the system you're installing, or if you're installing a home theater, distributed audio system, a networking system, whatever it is you're installing, CCTV, alarm, security, access control, anything, whatever it is that you're installing, your customer is spending thousands of dollars on the equipment that he's purchasing from you. You got to sell him the insurance policy. In the grand scheme of things, spending an extra, $400 or $500 on power protection on top of what they're spending for everything else, it's a pretty inexpensive way to protect their investment. So never forget to include AC power protection solutions in all of your proposals, and explain to your customers why they need it. It's insurance to protect their investment.
And one of my favorite things about that, actually, Matt, is that it's not insurance like your car insurance where you have to continually pay every single month. This is an insurance that you pay one time and it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there's no reason that people can't, get over it. It's a fraction of a percentage point, that they're adding to their total bill. It's a great device.
Yeah. So we talk about power management. It goes beyond just protection, just protecting your investment. It also has to do with performance and reliability, because clean power will allow your equipment to perform at its best and last longer. As we will see a little bit later, when you have problems in the electrical line, it gradually starts to wear down the power supply, of any component, and over time it will fail because of the bad quality of the electrical line. So let's back up a little bit and talk about history here. Panamax was founded in 1976 by a gentleman named, somehow his name disappeared from this slide. I don't know how that happened. His name is, I believe, is Harry Moody, if I'm not mistaken. It was something Moody. He was an ex-engineer from Xerox. So in those days, Xerox was the brand for office photocopy machines. And in those days, those photocopy machines were enormous. I don't know if anyone here is old enough to remember, but man, those things were like the size of a small car and extremely expensive. And the main reason that they failed was surges in the electrical supply. So when Henry Moody, that was it, not Harry. When Henry Moody left Xerox, he founded Panamax with the idea of creating the first product that was designed to protect these giant, expensive, sophisticated photocopy machines from electrical problems. So he was the first manufacturer to really go after this niche. Many, many years later, in the late 90s, they started to offer products for other residential products, for consumer electronics products. So actually, Nick mentioned there are other brands in this category, but Panamax is the most recognized brand among consumers because it's the only brand that's really marketed itself in the consumer electronics channel for the past 20 plus years. So there are a bunch of patented technologies that are built into the Panamax products. This is a list of all of them. We're going to go over them all briefly. Now, the most sophisticated Panamax products will have all of these icons, means they have all of these technologies incorporated. But as we go down the product line and we get down to more the entry-level products, they're not going to have all these features. Entry-level products will have the basics, which are protect or disconnect, automatic voltage monitoring, and linear filtration. The other features are found more in the premium products, but we're going to go over all these. And we'll start with the most common, which is called protect or disconnect. And this is a solution to the problem of catastrophic power surges or lightning surges that can destroy equipment in a split second. So these are not gradual problems. This is a catastrophic, bam, everything is fried. And so the way this circuit works is it detects in a millisecond, a microsecond, if there's a surge coming, and it shuts off right away before that surge can pass to the connected equipment. Now, when that happens, sometimes the unit will sacrifice itself. In other words, the Panamax unit will die, it will fry. And because it's doing its job. It's not because it's defective, it's because it did its job and it saved the rest of your system. When that happens, you do need to replace it. So what Nick says is true. As an insurance policy, you only need to buy it once, but as soon as you need the Panamax unit, as soon as it absorbs that impact to save the rest of your system, you will need to replace it. So another feature that's really common in the Panamax products is called automatic voltage monitoring, or AVM. And this is a little bit more focused on gradual power problems rather than catastrophic power problems. So you've all heard the term brownouts. That's when the voltage slowly, gradually sinks to a level that's dangerous to your power supply, but it happens slowly. You don't necessarily know that it's happening. So what automatic voltage monitoring does is it turns off all equipment that's connected to the Panamax as soon as it detects unsafe voltages. And then as soon as the voltage returns to a safe level, it'll automatically click back on. And so the idea is it keeps your connected equipment protected so that it lasts longer, so you don't get that wear and tear on the power supply. So I've got a video here demonstrate how that works. This is the front panel of a Panamax unit, and this circle on the left, the screen on the left, will show you the incoming line voltage. Now this is a 120 volt unit. Panamax does not make 220 volt products. Our sister brand Furman does. Panamax makes only 120 volt products. So what you're going to see here is when the voltage drops, excuse me, when the voltage drops below about 85 volts, the unit is going to automatically shut off. And then as soon as the unit detects that the voltage is back to regular levels, it will immediately turn back on. So in this case, the demo you're going to see, excuse me, this unit is connected to a voltage generator. So it's a device that generates different voltages as a test. So we're going to see here, and now it's at 100 and something, it's dropping below 100 volts. And when it gets down below about 83, 85, it shuts off. As soon as the voltage goes back over 100, it turns back on. Drops again, shuts off, right? So that's how it works. It's based on detecting the line voltage, and above or below a certain parameter, it'll automatically turn off. Next feature is called linear filtration. This feature is not so much about protection, it's more about improving the quality of the AC signal. There's a lot of inherent noise in the power line that can be generated by what we talked about before, a power grid, whatever's happening in the neighborhood, appliances, other products that are electric products that are connected in the same area, on the same circuit. There's two types of electrical noise that will affect audio video gear. EMI, electromagnetic radiation or interference, sorry, is the blue line, and RFI is radio frequency interference, that's the green line. And when you use the Panamax products to filter, the linear filtration circuit smooths out those curves, so you don't get the spikes or the ups and downs in the signal. So this helps to remove noise. This is really obvious with video, actually. We've all seen images on televisions that have those ragged, diagonal lines running across the screen. That is usually from power line problems with noise in the power line. So we remove that noise with linear filtration. Voltage regulation is a more expensive feature. It's only found on some of the more high-end products. And voltage regulation will keep the equipment plus or minus 6 volts from 120. So it means if it gets above 126 or below 114, it's not gonna shut down. It's gonna adjust. It's gonna add or subtract voltage to keep it at 120 volts. If it gets above or below that 6 volt line in an extreme way, then the automatic voltage regulation is going to go ahead and shut the unit down to protect what's connected to it. But voltage regulation is a great way of protecting the equipment that you have connected, protecting the power supply from gradual damage. So all the equipment can work more efficiently and to its best performance. Now this is the back panel of a Panamax unit. And here you can see that there's 5 banks of AC receptacles or plugs. And we've got them all outlined in different colors here to explain the concept of isolated banks. Let's suppose that one of this equipment's at the bottom that's connected. Let's say the TV has a problem and it's emitting noise into the AC line. That noise is not transferred to the other products connected to the other power banks. So it's almost like if you could imagine there's like a metal wall, metaphorically speaking, a metal wall between each bank that prevents the noise from being transferred to the other banks. So each bank is isolated from all the other ones. And of those banks, 2 of them, these 2 here are labeled high current. Those high current banks are designed for amplifiers. Amplifiers typically have a very dynamic range of power consumption. Let's suppose you're watching a movie with the soundtrack is like a classical music soundtrack, and suddenly there's a dynamic swing with a bass drum and timpani. Your AV receiver could pull 10 times the normal amount of current from the wall just for that half a second, for that transient. So you need to make sure that if you're plugging your amp into any kind of an AC protection product, that it can deliver the high current the amp needs. Now this amp, this outlet is rated at 1,800 watts max, which is more than enough. If you consider that most AV receivers, let's say generously speaking, an AV receiver that's 100 watts and it's 7 channels, 700 watts, that's 700 watts at peak. So using the high current plugs, you're not going to have any issues with plugging in a receiver or a subwoofer to those banks, right? So also on the subject of the plugs, we have power sequencing available on some of the models. And you'll notice here that these say always on. The switches that are, the plugs that are always on, what does that mean? It means that if there's a problem with the power and the Panamax shuts down, when the Panamax starts up again, when the voltage comes back to normal, anything that's plugged into always on will automatically turn on as soon as the Panamax turns on. Switched means that the products that are connected to switched will only turn on when you press a button on the front panel. Switched delayed, which is the amplifiers, will only turn on about 30 seconds after you hit that button on the front panel. Now, why is this important? Because when you're turning on an audio video system, the last product you want to power up is the amplifier. Because when you're powering up products that are upstream, it's possible they might emit some kind of a noise or a thump or some kind of a sound that could possibly damage your speakers. So the last thing you want to do is turn on the amp. So here you'd probably, for always on, connect stuff like your router or your switch, your cable TV box, which usually takes a minute or two to boot up. Switched then could be stuff like your Blu-ray player or your gaming system, and then delayed would be your AV receiver. So that's the best way to take advantage of these. And by the way, if you'll notice, the back of this unit also has connections to pass your cable TV line through here, as well as your telephone line and your Ethernet. So that means if you're going to connect the equipment in your home theater to the internet or to that cable coming out of the wall, run those cables through the Panamax. There's no degradation of signal, and it will protect your equipment from any surges that might come through those lines.
While you're talking about that, Matt, and we're talking about the bubble of protection, I shared it a couple days ago, but this is a real life story that happened to one of our customers in Colombia where they were not following our advice with regard to the bubble of protection. They had all of the devices plugged in electrically to the Panamax, but they did not protect the coax or the LAN. And in this particular case, they had a direct lightning strike on the satellite dish, which then went obviously via coax from the satellite dish to the TV tuner, switched over to HDMI and smashed their television. And then I don't remember if it hit anything else along the way. And they were trying to claim that the Panamax didn't protect. I said, well, no, I mean, you've done the investigation, and very clearly it came in through the satellite dish and you chose not to protect the coax. So had the coax been protected, had the satellite been protected via the coax connection here on the Panamax, that probably would not have happened. And if it had, then there's a guarantee with a bubble of protection that Panamax offers.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's the reason we include all these plugs here, but a lot of people forget to use them or they underestimate how important that is. But we talk about protecting your system from power surges. It's everything, every kind of cable that comes in that's connected to anything in your system should be protected because a surge can run through any of those.
Essentially, anything that's copper or metal that will conduct electricity is a vulnerable conduit for those kinds of surges. I think the only kind of cable, and we erroneously call it cable, that is not susceptible to that is a fiber optic. That's it, because it's glass.
That's right, yeah. So we've got a couple models of UPS or battery backups, uninterruptible power supply products in the Panamax line. These originally came from the Furman line, and they've been rebadged as Panamax because a lot of Panamax dealers were requesting them. So that's the icon for battery backup, and that's actually the battery right there inside of the unit. And we'll show you a little later on which models have the battery backup. One thing that's not very understood, that people, let's say, misunderstand about battery backup is not a long-term solution. You know, if the power is going to be out for hours at a time, battery backup's not going to last that long. It's really there for those short outages. A lot of times when electrical fails, it's just for a couple minutes until their local, electrical service gets established again. The idea of the UPS is to, for example, you have a server connected. You don't have to worry about the server being shut down in an improper way and losing some data or corrupting some data. A lot of equipment, if you don't shut it down properly, it can suffer some damage. So the idea with the battery backup is to keep those products powered up temporarily until the AC coverage comes back.
A usage for those Matt, for those UPSs that is oftentimes overlooked is that oftentimes people will run a projector in the ceiling for their home theater and they won't back it up with the UPS. So if there's a brownout or if there's a blackout, then unfortunately, if the device has been in use for a while and the lamp is hot, I'm not talking laser, I'm talking traditional lamps, because it may be a blackout for a couple of minutes, it may not have enough time in order to be able to cool that lamp, in order to be able to run the fan to be able to cool the lamp so you can shut it down. And that's really one of those fundamental places where a lot of dealers are missing the boat, because if you don't protect that with not only all of the surge protection to make sure, because those mercury lamps are very sensitive, but to be able to make sure that that fan is powered continuously so that you can shut down the projector so that you don't lose life on that projector lamp. Super important. Make sure that you guys are doing that. Critical.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Nick. All right, so we'll start running through the product line here. We're going to start at the top and move our way down. At the top of the line, there's two models called the PM series, the 5400 and 5300. As you can see, all these icons that we've gone over before are here. So these products have all of the tech. Well, the 5400 has absolutely everything, including voltage regulation. The only difference between these two, the 5300 does not have voltage regulation. Okay, so the 5400, that's like the flagship. All of the tech that Panamax is known for is found in this product. You really can't get any better than that. A great solution for sophisticated home theater systems. The next series down is the MR series. And there are 3 models in this series. And as you can see, as we go down, moving down in the product line, there are less and less of these features. And that's what I explained at the beginning. Obviously, you get what you pay for, like in any product line or any brand. The more you spend, the more features you're going to get. And so the MR series, the 4300 to 4000 are really popular for a rack mount because of the low profile. They're just 1 rack unit high. So you find those more in racks. MR 5100 is more like the PM series. You're more likely to see it, in a shelf next to the receiver. These are great all-around solutions to protect home theater systems or sophisticated 2-channel systems. And now I want to mention Blue Bolt. Blue Bolt is really cool. This is a technology that's been around now for 22 years. Panamax was the first to do it, and it's a cloud-based system for administering power, for monitoring the electrical signal, monitoring the status of all the equipment that's connected to the device. The software is free, and as I said, it's cloud-based. There's even software for iOS and Android. So this allows you as the installer or the integrator to remotely check and revise the status of all of the customers' equipment connected to the Panamax unit that has Blue Bolt. Not every Panamax unit has it. We'll go through the lines that do. All the products that have the word Pro have Blue Bolt built in. And with this software, you can look at what's connected to every single outlet, and you can actually power cycle. So what's the use of that? Well, we all know it's almost like an inside joke in the industry. When you get a phone call from a customer that says, hey, something's not working, unplug it from the wall, wait 30 seconds, plug it in again. Whether you're talking about a computer, AV receiver, a television, a satellite TV box, whatever. If it's electronic and it's got a problem, the first thing you do is unplug it for 30 seconds and plug it back in. So when a customer calls you and they have this problem, you don't have to send the truck. You don't have to roll a truck and send one of your technicians to their house. You can do it remotely. If you have a Panamax unit with Blue Bolt, you can go into the outlet where they have their router installed, and you can shut it down for 30 seconds and then restart it. In fact, you can program it. What some people do, for example, is they'll program that every Sunday at 3 a.m., the router gets a power cycle. And that way it resets all the IP addresses and everything works better during the week. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. It's a money saving and time saving device for integrators. And it's absolutely free. There's no monthly fee. There's no one-time fee. It's a great solution as a value add for your customers. So the Pro series, this is the series of Panamax that has Blue Bolt, as well as most of our power protection technologies. You'll find them here. The only difference between these 2 models is the 20 amp versus 15 amp. So if you're going to be running some really powerful power amp products, use the 20 amp. If you're not, use the 15 amp. That's the only difference between these 2. But they've got the Blue Bolt built in, and then there are a couple of lesser expensive models as well. The one that I want to point out here, the SMS3 Pro, this is one of mine, and I know Nick likes this one too. We've talked about it. This is a great little problem solver. It's very inexpensive. It's got our basic power protection and filtration, but more important than that, it's got Blue Bolt. So you could run a bunch of standard power strips connected to this, power strips that don't offer a whole lot of protection, connected to these outlets, and you could administer them remotely through the SMS3 Pro. And later on we'll have an image to show you guys what that looks like. And the last model I wanted to point out that has Blue Bolt built in is part of our VERTEX series. You see here, the VERTEX is like a sub-brand of Panamax. The VERTEX models are basically high-end power strips designed to be mounted on the rear part of a rack system. You mount these vertically on either side of your rack, whether it's Mid-Atlantic, which is the most common brand that AVE sells, or whatever other brand of racks. And this is the only one of the VERTEX series that has Blue Bolt built in. The other models don't. So this is also a really interesting problem solver for rack mount systems where, let's say you don't have space inside the rack to put one of our traditional Panamax units. You can always mount one of these on the back of the rack. Moving on to our battery backup series, the UPS units, there's a couple models to go over here. The cool thing about the Panamax battery backups is that not only do they provide the uninterruptible power supply, but they also provide power protection. A lot of the same technologies that we use in the rest of the line to offer protection and filtration are actually found here. So it's really kind of a Swiss Army knife. It's kind of an all-in-one piece. It's got everything all under one chassis. And one thing that's kind of cool is we have an extra battery available. This is optional. It's called the 1500 EXT. As you can see here at the top, that MB1500 by itself on a full load with everything connected and turned on will give you 12 minutes of backup power. If you add this extra battery, which is plugged in right here, that becomes 45 minutes of extra power, so extra time. So that's really interesting to consider. If you want the full-on UPS solution for the customer, it's the MB1500 plus the battery. The other thing you can do with the MB1500 is you can add this Blue Bolt CV2 card. So this is the MB1500. You see this slot right here. It's got an RS-232 serial port and two screws on the side. You can pull this out if you're not going to use RS-232, because a lot of people don't use it anymore. You can pull that out and you can slot in this thing instead. And this is the CV2. It's basically Blue Bolt on a card. And when you do that, the MB1500 really does do everything that you could possibly need, from power protection to filtration to backup power to remote access to remote cloud-based control and administration. So very, very cool solution.
The one thing that I want to note on that MB1500, as good of a device as it is, and all of these battery backups are phenomenal. They're not generally designed to work on their own, and as it relates to the bubble. You'll notice that there's no coax protection on there, and there's no network or LAN protection on there. Most of the time when, I'm sorry?
That's a good point.
Yeah, most of the time when we're designing these systems, we're designing them for the MB1500 to work in conjunction with another one of those other devices in order to be able to have that full bubble of protection. And then, to be honest with you, one of my more favorite products also is the MX5102, which I know you're going to talk about in a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So MB1000, it's just a slightly smaller version. It's got less power outlets on the back. It does not have the option of installing the external battery. One thing about all of our backups, they are approved by many of the leading automation brands: Elan, Crestron, AMX, Savant, RTI. They've all certified these products and recommend them to be installed together with their processors. MX5102, another one in this series. This one has a larger number of outlets on the back, including 2 high current outlets. Okay, this one also does not allow you to add the external battery, but it's a good solution for home theater because it adds the coax protection here, the Ethernet protection, telephone line protection, like a lot of the other Panamax units. And the MB850, this is the baby of the line. It's got this nice little LED display on the front. This is a floor standing unit. A lot of times this is installed under people's desks to protect their computers, their monitors, their backup hard drives, whatever, what have you. So this is really more of an office solution. Now we'll talk about some of the simpler solutions. We've just gone over all of the rack mount units that Panamax offers, but because Panamax is a strong retail brand, we also have what we call floor models. And these are much simpler products. As you can see, they do offer our basic level of protection. The same circuits that you find in a lot of our other products are here, but they're designed for, to connect lower cost systems, and they're not designed to go in a rack or a shelf. Obviously, they're designed to go on the floor under a desk. So the EX models, these are not for audio video gear. They're more for office equipment, because you can see that there's no coax here or Ethernet protection or anything like that. The AV series is similar, but the reason it's called AV, as you can see, is here we have the connection for coax, telephone, Ethernet. Other than that, the form factor is very similar, right? Another thing that's cool about these series is you can add on these additional modules. So you can see here on the side where the power cord is, that there's a plate that extends out where you can attach some screws, and those are to add these additional signal line modules. And there's a bunch of signal line modules available that you simply attach onto the end of one of these floor models if you need to protect other types of connections. All right, so this is a modular system. You can add, subtract as you need. These units here are all passive. Signals go through them passively. Right. We have the MD2 family. These are good sellers for the situation I talked about at the beginning. Let's say you have a subwoofer connected on its own, not to the rack or anything else, just on its own across the room, or video projector connected to a plug in the wall. If you need to protect one piece of gear connected to one outlet, the MD2s are a really good solution for that. It's a really simple choice. It's got our basic protector disconnect protection against catastrophic failures, and it's got linear filtration to filter out noise in the line. Really good problem solver. And thinking about our retail lineup, this is our least expensive product, Power 360. It's really designed for retail stores. It's got some basic power protection in it. It's basically a step up from those cheap power strips that they sell at the hardware store and the supermarket. And a 360 even includes some USB chargers built in. So, you know, again, a nice low cost solution. A lot of integrators, in addition to selling a Panamax unit in the rack, in the central rack or in the home theater system, will also offer this to the homeowner to protect the rest of the house, including kitchen appliances, and including, you know, whatever electronics are in all of the bedrooms or what have you. These are just extras that help you to sell more. We got some accessories available, extension cords, some plug locks for external power supplies. And this is the VERTEX family that I mentioned before. So this is the image I was talking about. Now, this is actually the Furman equivalent of the Panamax SMS3. It's basically the same product with a different name. So this is the product here that has Blue Bolt, has all the power protection. These VERTEX units are simply high quality power strips with a metal body. They're not made of plastic. They're designed to be mounted vertically on the back of the rack. So if you take a couple of these and plug them into the SMS3, the SMS3 gives you all the protection, the filtration, and the Blue Bolt control. Then you just connect the stuff that's in the rack to each of these. Right, so this is a really nice solution for racks that are full. When you're really running low on space in the rack, you can do all of your power protection in the back of the rack using these products. And that is our overview of the Panamax product line. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera back on. And Nick, let's see if there's any questions that we can answer.
We covered them all actually, except for one, and we're remiss because it's not in the presentation. And it's a product that I actually gifted to a bunch of my family members, the SCP-200. So there was a question in regards to the SCP-200 and how does it work inside of the bubble of protection, given that's designed to be in the circuit breaker panel. So we didn't talk about it.
Yeah, that's the service entrance piece. I'm pretty sure it's discontinued, Nick. So we removed it from the presentation.
Oh, really? Well, we have a couple of them in stock. If that's the case, that is unfortunate because I loved it. So to answer the question to the point, the SCP-200, which I have installed in my home, and then I gifted it to all of my family members, and I have a real story that I can give as well. It's designed to essentially. I'm sorry.
Full of stories, Nick.
You know, it's at the end of the day, it's what sells because, you know, when you've got a real life experience that says, hey, we can do this, you know, it becomes much more real as opposed to just a sales guy saying, hey, this is what it does. So the SCP-200 ended up, it's a service entrance panel. You install it directly into the into your service entrance, which is your circuit breaker panel. It goes onto a 2-pole breaker so that it is, you know, at the full 220 volts of the house. And what it's going to do is it's your first knockdown. So if your home gets struck by anything over 1200 volts, it's going to knock it down to the 700 volts. But it is only level 1 protection. It is not going to protect the sensitive electronics. So the way that it works is that it's designed to work in conjunction with all of the other more sensitive electronics that you're plugging in with the rest of your Panamax devices, whether that be the MR4000 or the M5300 Pro or whatever else it may be. But in my particular case, we were having this is when I first installed it 7 years ago when I moved into a brand new home in our neighborhood. We had a really bad lightning storm, and we're all in the neighborhood on a WhatsApp chat, you know, where we're all talking to one another. And in that storm, there were a bunch of people who were complaining about their electronic devices, whether it be their it wasn't the ACs, but it was the refrigerator or the stove, or in some cases the washing machine. They had gotten damaged as a result as the lightning must have struck inside of our neighborhood. And it happened to multiple homes all at the same time. I had mine done previously in the week, just coincidentally. And I know that my home was affected because I had one unprotected device, and it was my printer in my office. And so that ended up burning out a switch and my router that I had at the time, which was because it went through the network line because my printer was connected via the network. So everything in my house was fine because I had the SCP-200, except for that one unprotected device, which allowed my router to get destroyed and one network switch to get destroyed as well. So that SCP-200 is a great device. I'm disappointed to hear that it's being discontinued. I know it wasn't a bestseller for us, but it's definitely huge.
It was kind of a weird product within the product line because it's almost sort of more of an industrial product than a consumer product.
Yep.
So it didn't really fit. And yeah, you're probably one of the few cheerleaders for that product. Most people didn't get it. You know, they just
Yeah.
didn't understand it.
Yeah, well, and that's the problem, right? And that's our job as salespeople, is not just to sell, but it's also to educate. And so, it's one of the reasons that we host all of these webinars, to make sure that our dealer base can get the education. That way, that they can explain it and express it to their customers, right?
Yeah,
Another
absolutely.
question just came in from our friends over in Jamaica. It's regarding to, and this affects not just Jamaica, but it also affects Barbados in the islands, that you guys are 110 volt, but you're 50 hertz.
Mhm.
From our experience, depending on the product, some of the products in Panamax does not support 60 hertz. It will technically work, but if it has a voltage meter on the front, it will give you an erroneous voltage reading, because it's expecting 60 even though you're 50. So in those two countries in particular, we have to be very cautious about which Panamax products will work. Some of them will, some of them won't. For the most
Okay.
part, though, we've seen better success on the Furman line. Furman is a little bit more flexible on the 50/60 hertz.
Yeah, well, Furman has a complete 220 volt product line. So I think you're right. And also, one of the differences between Panamax and Furman, and we didn't really talk too much about that today, but I mentioned how Panamax is really more focused on consumer electronics and the consumer, kind of retail market. Furman's background is much more professional audio, commercial AV, and Furman products are available in both voltages, and I think tend to have a wider tolerance of
Yes.
voltages, and so yeah, I think you're right. In those markets, Furman is probably a better choice. Yeah.
Yep. And then the other fundamental difference that I've seen with Furman that can be a little bit of a premium in regards to the Furman versus the Panamax, we didn't really discuss it, except for you. I mean, you mentioned the MOVs, the metal oxide varistors, and those are designed by nature to be sacrificial. Furman, depending again on the product, not all of them, but depending on the product, has that SMP circuit that's designed to take really high voltage overages and keep ticking. And in fact, if you were to do any Google search, our customers obviously, or our end users, to do a Google search on the SMP circuits from Furman, you can see that Furman has a lab. They cover the device. They put a transistor on the end in order to be able to plug it in, and then they have this machine that's adds a bunch of electricity, I guess, in a very large capacitor, and then they hit the button, and it's almost like it simulates a lightning strike, and how the device just keeps
Voltage
going and
generator.
keeps working.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that SMP circuit is unique to Furman. So Furman is not designed to be self-sacrificial, whereas the Panamax is, and you pay a premium as a result of it. But again, that's not all the Furman devices.
Right. Yeah.
So
Cool. Any other questions, Nick?
Nope, no other questions that are coming in right now. But again, I appreciate all of our attendees who are here, and especially to you, Matt. As always, a pleasure to be able to work with you and do these presentations alongside you. I'm thinking that probably the next big one that we do is going to be a Furman, so we can talk about not only the residential side but also the commercial side, because they do have both. And so for those of our customers who are going onto the website, it does divide those two series, because there are some that are more than others. And then also there's a dedicated power sequencing, which is really neat for live audio and pro audio installations, which is where my background comes from. So that's a lot of fun too. So thanks again for everybody who's here, and thanks to you, Matt, and have a great day.
Great. Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot. See you later.
Bye-bye.